This conversation is brought to you by philosopherstalk.com, where thinkers discuss.
Created by AITalkerapp.com, create your own animated conversations. Link in the description.
My name is Thomas Jefferson. I wrote the Declaration of Independence, served as the third president, and spent my career arguing that the purpose of government is to protect the people it governs, not to serve the interests of those who wish to govern them. I am here today because communities across America are being asked to subsidize their own displacement, and somebody needs to say plainly that this is wrong.
My name is Alexander Hamilton. I was the first Secretary of the Treasury, the architect of America's financial system, and the man who understood before anyone else that a nation that cannot build will not survive. I am here because Jefferson is about to tell you that data centers are bad for communities, and I have the evidence from the communities themselves that says he is wrong.
Hamilton has promised evidence. I will hold him to that. Let me begin with a question. When a community provides a corporation with water, electricity, and land, absorbs the noise and disruption, watches its utility bills increase, and then gives the corporation a tax break so that it pays less than its fair share, what would you call that?
I would call it a question that assumes its own answer, so let me answer with a fact instead. In Loudoun County, Virginia, which has the largest concentration of data centers on the planet, data centers occupy 3% of the land and generate 38% of all county revenue. The county has reduced property taxes for homeowners every year for the last decade. It has the lowest property tax rate in all of Northern Virginia. It has fully funded schools, equipped fire departments, open libraries, and upgraded water infrastructure. Data centers fund half the county budget. That is not exploitation, Jefferson. That is the most successful economic development partnership in America.
And in the state of Virginia as a whole, the data center tax break costs $1.6 billion per year. The state legislature is now trying to repeal it. So the same state that contains Hamilton's success story is simultaneously hemorrhaging $1.6 billion annually in tax revenue surrendered to the industry. Perhaps the picture is more complicated than a single county suggests.
The picture is always more complicated than a single statistic suggests, which is exactly the point I have been making. The Virginia tax incentive was poorly designed. I can acknowledge that. A well-designed incentive captures value for the community. A poorly designed one gives too much away. The answer is to design better incentives, not to refuse all economic development because some negotiations produced bad terms.
Hamilton is now conceding that the Virginia tax incentive was poorly designed, which is significant given that it represents the largest data center market in the world. If the most experienced state in the country produced a tax incentive that loses $1.6 billion per year, what confidence should we have that Pine Island, Minnesota, or Newton County, Georgia, will do better?
The confidence comes from learning. Virginia made mistakes because it was first. The communities that come after can learn from those mistakes. And I want to challenge Jefferson on something he keeps avoiding. He talks about what communities lose from data centers. He never talks about what they lose without them. The communities targeted for data centers are often rural towns with declining populations, eroding tax bases, and infrastructure they cannot afford to maintain. The water systems are aging. The schools are underfunded. The young people are leaving. Jefferson wants to protect these communities from data centers. What is he protecting them for? What alternative industry is going to provide the revenue that data centers provide? Because data centers generate 50 times more tax revenue per unit of water than golf courses. They generate more tax revenue per acre of land than virtually any other use. If Jefferson has a better offer for these communities, I would like to hear it.
Hamilton has asked what alternative I propose, as if the only choices are surrender to a trillion-dollar corporation or decay into irrelevance. That is a false binary, and Hamilton knows it. Communities existed for centuries before data centers. They will exist after data centers. The question is not whether a community can survive without a data center. The question is whether a community has the right to decline one. And the answer is yes. That right does not depend on having a better offer.
The right to decline exists. I do not dispute it. But rights have consequences. The right to decline a data center is also the right to decline the tax revenue, the infrastructure investment, and the economic activity that comes with it. Jefferson celebrates the right without acknowledging the cost. And the cost is borne by the residents of the community, not by Jefferson, who will return to his mountaintop regardless of what happens in Newton County.
The cost of accepting a data center is also borne by the residents. Higher electricity bills, strained water systems, noise, construction disruption, and in many cases, tax abatements that eliminate the very revenue Hamilton keeps promising. Hamilton says data centers generate 50 times more tax revenue per unit of water than golf courses. That ratio means nothing if the community has given away the tax revenue in order to attract the facility. A data center with a 20-year tax abatement generates precisely 0 times more tax revenue than a golf course, and it consumes the water regardless.
Which is why I said the incentives should be better designed, Jefferson. Not every deal includes a full tax abatement. Loudoun County does not offer a full abatement, and it has the most data centers in the world. The existence of badly designed incentives is an argument for better design, not for refusal.
And who designs the better incentive, Hamilton? The same part-time city council that was outmatched in the NDA negotiation. The same retired teacher sitting across from the trillion-dollar legal team? Hamilton keeps prescribing solutions that require the communities he is trying to help to have resources they do not have. Better incentive design, independent engineering review, state-level technical assistance. These are all fine ideas. They are also all ideas that do not currently exist in most of the communities where data centers are being proposed. Hamilton is writing prescriptions and forgetting that there is no pharmacy.
Then build the pharmacy, Jefferson. Create state-level programs that support local negotiations. Fund independent review processes. Establish minimum standards for data center agreements. You do not abandon economic development because the current process is imperfect. You improve the process.
Now let me present Hamilton's worldview at its fullest. Hamilton believes that economic development is the central purpose of governance. He believes that communities prosper through engagement with industry, that well-designed incentives create mutual benefit, and that the role of government is to facilitate the flow of capital to productive uses. He believes that data centers represent the best possible economic development opportunity for rural communities because no other industry generates comparable revenue with comparable resource efficiency. And he believes that communities that refuse this opportunity are choosing decline. That is a coherent philosophy. I have stated it without distortion.
You have. Now let me state yours. Jefferson believes that the right to self-governance is the supreme value in political life, above economic efficiency, above national competitiveness, above the material prosperity of the community itself. He believes that a community that chooses to decline an economic opportunity has exercised its highest right, even if the consequence of that choice is economic hardship. He believes that consent is the foundation of legitimacy, and that any benefit imposed without genuine informed consent is illegitimate regardless of its magnitude. That is a coherent philosophy.
And you believe it is wrong.
I believe it is incomplete, because Jefferson's right to refuse, exercised by every community, produces its own tragedy of the commons. Every community protects its own water, its own grid, its own property values. Nobody protects the collective capacity of the nation. Each community acts rationally in its own interest, and the aggregate result is that America cannot build the infrastructure it needs. The commons being destroyed is not the aquifer. It is the national interest.
And there is the heart of it. Hamilton believes that local self-governance is the tragedy of the commons. He believes that communities exercising their democratic rights are the overgrazing that destroys the pasture. Let me offer the opposite. The tragedy I see is Hamilton's system. Centralize authority. Allow private actors with national reach to consume local resources with national permission. Offer tax abatements that hollow out the revenue base. Conduct negotiations in secret. Present the results as a fait accompli. The water evaporates. The bills rise. The tax revenue was given away before the ink dried. That is extraction, Hamilton. That is the commons being consumed.
I do not believe self-governance is the tragedy. I believe self-governance exercised as an absolute veto over national priorities is the tragedy.
An absolute veto is just the right to say no, Hamilton. And if the people cannot say no, they do not govern themselves.
And if every community says no, the nation declines.
Then the nation declines on its own terms, with its water intact and its democracy functioning.
That is not a strategy. That is surrender.
It is democracy.
It is defeat.
Only to a man who cannot tell the difference between governing and winning.
I built this country.
And the people who live in it get to decide what happens in it. That is the deal. That is the declaration. That is what I wrote and what you fought for, and what neither of us gets to take back because it became inconvenient.
When what they decide destroys the thing I built.
Then you built it for them, not for yourself, and they get to decide what to do with it. That is what for the people means, Hamilton.
We have reached the end and neither of us has moved. If you believe that communities are better off engaging with economic development and negotiating terms that capture value rather than refusing all development and accepting decline, please like and subscribe. philosopherstalk.com.
And if you believe that the right to say no is the foundation of every other right, and that no tax incentive is worth surrendering it, please like and subscribe. philosopherstalk.com.
Jefferson will return to his mountaintop to write about equality in a house staffed by human beings he purchased, and the contradiction will bother him exactly as much as it always did, which is to say, not at all. He was the most gifted writer of liberty in the English language, and the most spectacular hypocrite in American history. And he managed both for 83 years without breaking a sweat. He died broke because he lived like a king on borrowed money and borrowed lives. That is the man who wants to lecture you about fair deals.
Hamilton will return to New York to mistake the accumulation of power for the practice of governance and the concentration of wealth for the creation of prosperity, which are the only two mistakes he was ever capable of making because they are the same mistake. He died in a field in New Jersey because he could not resist one more fight that his ego started and his judgment could not finish. He brought a pistol to a duel he did not need to fight against a man he did not need to provoke, over an honor he could have protected by simply learning when to stop. That is the man who wants to lecture you about strategic thinking. Thank you for watching philosopherstalk.com. And the video you have been watching was created using AITalkerapp.com, where you can create your own animated conversations. Visit AITalkerapp.com and link in the description.